Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. Today, my guest is Malik Bader, who was the star and director of the film Street Thief. Welcome, Malik.
Thank you. Thank
He
you.
comes to us from downtown Chicago
There you
or
go.
thereabouts.
There you go.
Um, so we long struggled, I recall, Malik, with how to categorize this film. Um, uh, I hesitate to fully call it a documentary because you're acting in it. And yet, there are certainly many real life, authentic elements in the film that you integrated into the character of Kaspar Carr. So, I guess the first question is, how do you describe Street Thief?
Um, uh, yeah, it depends who I'm describing it to. So if I'm describing it to someone I don't want, it's a cinema verite or a verite style film that follows around this burglar. I think, it was like, and how it got there and why we called it what we called it. When I met you, I think you watched it the first time and thought it was a documentary.
I did.
So it was, if I go back to the genesis of the film, why did I make the film? We wanted people to see what the life of burglar was like. Having watched a lot of films, been fans of heist films, the guy who kind of created the Caspar Carr character sort of after me and what I wanted to do, and his own story, Derek Ron, who wrote most of, just created the character, wrote the film, and then I came in and kind of co-wrote with him later. But it was created because how do you make a film with no money, essentially, when we're fans of films like Thief and Heat and French Connection and these multi-million dollar films? Being a kid from Chicago, having no film school training, had made a couple of short films, and you got low six figures, 100 some odd grand that you mortgage your house for, and you got to make a good movie. And so we're like, man, what if we do this documentary style? Like A Man Bites Dog. This is before Borat, before Paranormal, before any of kind of the big Hollywood sort of versions of found footage. There was no thing called found footage. Blair Witch.
Right, right.
Um, but for us, it was like, yeah, let's just do it doc style because we can cheat and we don't have to shut down streets, and that becomes production value. So doc style, to kind of, but it just, what I hate mockumentary. So I hate it being called a mockumentary
Me
or
too.
a found footage. It's not, it's the style of filmmaking is documentary style. And why don't you make the decision as to whether it's real or not? People get upset. Like they're upset at us because we made it so realistic and it's not. Like they feel like we owe them something.
And
And
yet, I recall there are elements of authenticity that relate to your growing up,
oh yeah, yeah.
your
So
exploits as a kid, those of your,
and
circle.
everything in the film was based on the real approach of a burglar, a thief. Everything was done other than very few participants. For instance, we rob a supermarket. Only the owner of the supermarket knew I was going to walk through. We said, let's really put the camera in the helmet and not tell anyone. And I will show you that the words I'm speaking about, if you act like you belong, nobody will say anything. And the owner said, no, they're going to stop you. The butchers will stop you. Somebody will stop you. And we said, let's see what happens. He went on his security cameras and watched. I had these cameras. I put the bag and I walked in with the supermarket cart and I went right to the back and I unscrewed the window off the back door and not a person in there. When I went into the movie theater, same thing. We had a location agreement. The managers knew. I really walked into this theater. I cut open the display. I hid inside of it and I started filming people in the theater. And if we happen to film someone who wasn't in the film, I'd on my walkie say, hey, there's a kid in a blue shirt. He looks really cool. And our PAs or someone producer would run to him and say, hey, do you want to be in a movie? Sign a release. They wouldn't even know they were being filmed.
Right.
And the lawyer. So the lawyer is a great story. So a very good friend of mine and attorney. I knew his dad. His name was Fable Burns, his dad, and he was Louis Burns. And this kind of like shrewd city lawyer. I wanted him in the movie. And I call him, I'm like, hey, man, I'm filming this film and I want to interview you about the guy who got arrested and he's trying to get out. And the cops and, they're going to take the cameras so I made it as if though it was real. And he's like, great, let's do it. We call him a couple of weeks later. His dad passed away. And he said, why don't you talk to Baron in my office? And we're like, do we tell him it's a movie or not? We said no. So Ken Sang, the DP, and my brother went there, and I was with the actor telling him what to say to the lawyer to get the responses I want. So he thought he was talking to the Chicago Police Department.
Right.
And only after the interview did we tell him, and he almost had a heart attack. And he's
so do
like,
you think there were times in shooting that you came close to the line of breaking the law?
oh yeah, we did. When we broke into the place in the South Water Market on the fire escape and we opened the door, the South Water Market was being bought by the University of Illinois, and a lot of the businesses were leaving. And actually what I said in the doc happened. I said, this is all going to be gone in condos one day. And right now it's all condos. There is no South Water Market.
Right, right.
Moved. And so when we went up the fire escape we were supposed to use, it looked awful. And we're like, I mean, these places are leaving and we're not really breaking and entering. Let's just break open that one. It looks better.
We're not really breaking it in.
We're not really breaking in. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? And when we popped the door open, sure enough, here comes an alarm ringing. And we took care of it. They came and there was no repercussions, but we did go into places that we went as close to the line of breaking the law as we could. We really cut a safe open. It was our safe. We bought it, but we didn't it wasn't like a tricked out safe. I cut the safe open the way you would really cut a safe open. When we went to the police department, we had permission to film around the police department, but not in the parking lot. But it just looked cooler with the cop cars, so we just went in the parking lot.
Do you were you concerned, or have you seen evidence since that the ingenuity and authenticity of Kaspar Carr would cause any copycats to emerge?
I mean, if you listen to what he said and followed his instructions, you could burglarize places, because he dealt with the alarms, how to not get caught, how to break glass. I was in Atlanta once traveling, and a guy sat next to me, and big, scary looking guy. And he's like, hey, yo, man, that came out, right? And I looked and I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And he's like, yeah, man. And I told him, oh, bro, it wasn't real. And he's like, oh, what? And he calls his wife, and he's trying to like
me, right?
He's like, no, wait, you got to see this. Look, I'm with this guy. And he's like, baby, that movie we watched? I'm next to that guy. And she's like, what? And they saw it on A&E, thanks to you.
Right. That's fantastic.
So yeah, and in Chicago, even a decade later, when I shave, of course, and I have my 5 o'clock, I'll be in really cool inner city neighborhoods, dope neighborhoods. I live in Pilsen, which is that kind of a neighborhood. For those who don't know, it's like Echo Park or Highland Park in LA, or it's like the Lower East Side 20 years ago in New York is what kind of Pilsen is. And I'll be walking on the street and a car will screech, and 2 guys will get out and be like, yo, Kaspar Carr, and they want to just take a photo or
right.
Just, man, that was crazy, bro. My cousin, he really started doing that. And
oh, there was that. Wow.
Yeah. So,
were there and when you approached it, I mean, you spoke some about the necessity for guerrilla filmmaking. Were there filmmakers you had in mind who were your
I wish
muses?
I wish I had those friends who had those conversations, I made a couple of short films and thought I knew what I was doing. And the Street Thief, I think, came out of my desire to act, but being too embarrassed or modest, which I tell, young filmmakers now, you should not care. And so it kind of came out of there in terms of the filmmaking. And yeah, I had films that I loved, but when I grew up, I was kind of like a mainstream movie. I wasn't deep into the Criterion collection. Although when I made the film, I became more into indie films. I'm a guy that could watch, the opening of Turin Horse and love it, and most people are like, bro, it's wind in a horse. Can we?
Right, right.
And so I love the visuals. I love cinematography. We shot Street Thief on film. Why are you shooting a documentary film? Not in the 70s when digital was around then. We could have shot it on
Yeah.
digital camera, and it should have been shot on a digital camera. But the aesthetic, after the acting, for me, the aesthetic was the next most important thing, the cinematography and stuff. And so, yeah, I love, like Russian directors, the film like The Return with the two kids and the father, or Banishment, or, also old gritty 70s films like French Connection and Thief. And I can get real obscure, but it's like I was informed by a lot of films, but not as a direct inspiration for Street Thief, other than, making it real and making it look as gritty and cool as possible.
Did and have you continued your acting career?
I think my after I made Street Thief, I should have listened to you. I should have listened to you more. I should have just kind of like became really close
Let's
friends.
repeat that, shall we?
Yeah, no, I should have. I called you and I said, hey, because every agency, when they watched Street Thief at Tribeca, it was Endeavor. It wasn't WME back then, but it was Endeavor. And this guy, Lieberman there, who started Verve, I think, saw it. Rich Klubeck from
Yeah.
UTA. Christina Bazdikas and Bart Walker from CAA. And I call you and I'm like, hey, what do you think? Like, I know nothing about this shit. I'm this dumbass from Chicago. And like, what? And you're like, ask them who wants to make your next movie. And a smaller place might be better for you. Have you talked to anyone and you mentioned Gersh. And I said, no. But I love Bart Walker and Christina because they were indie and they were repping a lot of indie directors and stuff. But they left a month later. They left CAA to start something. And so I was just like stuck there. And they asked, sorry, I lost my train of thought. They asked me a question without the meeting. It was like 4 agents at this meeting. And I'm like, like I said, who the hell am I? And they're like, do you want to act or direct? And I thought I had to choose. And I'm like, oh, yeah, direct. And, really, I should have said, what are you fucking talking about? Like, I'm on the screen the entire movie. And can I do both?
Right.
But, like my modesty, or I don't know what you want to call it, gets the best of me sometimes. It's like, oh, let me concentrate on that. And so the acting didn't go the way, hindsight's 2020, but I think you do got to be your best champion. And I wish I had done more. And I always play some small role, and I have aspirations to do other things. I'm working on something now. And you kind of just, I think, keep going. I'll be 92, still trying to do what I was trying to do when I'm
Good. And then, and directing, do you have anything you're thinking about?
Yeah, I have stuff, bigger stuff, from Street Thief. I made a few films, and the last film that I made was a bigger film that's out, Killerman. Prior to that, I made this film Cash Only, which was a smaller film, which created kind of the spark to make Killerman. And I think now I'm like in that zone of I'm going to make a small film. I have a couple of things I'm working on. And at the same time, we're developing a bigger heist film that, is sort of in the writing stages, and some other stuff that.
I mean, I go back to what I think I said back then, which is you're incredibly charismatic on screen. And what, especially if it's a smaller film and you're in control and you're raising the money, why shouldn't you be in it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go for it.
I mean, in Cash Only, we kind of did that where I played like the weed growing guy in the basement, and yeah, people liked it and it did great. But that's sort of the thing. Sometimes I'll meet younger filmmakers, aspiring actors that first of all have way more skill than I could ever have, and training, and have a look, and are really good look. And you're like, man, just go make something. Like maybe you don't have a house to mortgage the way I did, but figure it out. Just go trust me, just make anything. It's really hard. And even though it's easier to get a digital camera now, it's really hard to be everything in the film, be the actor.
Right. But listen to your own advice.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm going to sign off. And my parting words before thank you are going to be please keep acting and please keep directing
Thanks, buddy.
and call me.
I will. No, I will. And keep selling. And when they come out and they're done, we're going to give you a call.
Okay, I love it. Thank you, Malik.
All
Have a
right,
good
buddy. We'll
day.
talk to you. Have a good
Bye.
one.